The desert air was thick with smoke, dust, and the bitter sting of burning metal. The ground trembled beneath the rumble of tanks and distant mortar fire. Corporal James Miller lay sprawled in the dirt, his body broken, blood seeping through his uniform like ink on paper. His breaths came shallow, ragged, each one harder to grasp than the last. Beside him, kneeling in the chaos, was Sergeant Daniel, Reaper, Hayes. To the world outside, he was a Hell's Angel, a man whose name carried more fear than respect. Tattoos curled up his arms like dark vines, scars mapped his skin, and his eyes told stories of bar fights, prison cells, and endless nights on the road. But here, in the unforgiving sand of a foreign battlefield, he wasn't a biker. He was a soldier, a brother, and the last lifeline James had left. "Stay with me, Miller," Daniel barked, pressing a trembling hand against the wound in James's chest. Blood bubbled up, warm and relentless, staining Daniel's hands red. He'd seen plenty of death, brothers shot down in the streets, friends laid to rest under the roar of Harleys, but this felt different. This was a man who had laughed with him in the barracks, shared rations, swapped stories about home. This was family. James's eyes fluttered, glazed with pain yet locked onto Daniel with a desperate fire. His hand clutched Daniel's wrist with surprising strength. "Reaper," he coughed, crimson spilling from his lips. "Listen, promise me something." Daniel's jaw clenched. Promises weren't his thing. In the biker world, promises got broken as often as bottles in a bar fight. But the way James's voice cracked, raw, pleading, made Daniel lean closer. "My family," James whispered, forcing the words past the blood in his throat. "Emily, my wife, and my little girl, Lily. She's only 7. Don't let them be alone." His grip weakened, fingers trembling. "Promise me you'll look after them, promise me." Daniel froze. The battlefield roared around him, bullets snapping through the air, shouts of men carried by the wind, but all he heard was James's voice. His chest tightened. He wasn't a hero, not by any stretch. He was a sinner, an outlaw, a man who had left a trail of wreckage behind him. But looking into James's eyes, clouded by pain and fading life, he knew he couldn't turn away. "I give you my word," Daniel said, his voice rough but steady. "On my life, I'll take care of them. They won't ever be alone." James's body relaxed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. His eyes closed, his hand slipped from Daniel's wrist, and the last breath rattled out of him like a dying flame. Daniel sat frozen, blood covering his hands, heart pounding against his ribs. Around him, the battle raged on, but inside, a silence screamed louder than gunfire. He looked down at James, the man who had trusted him with his most precious treasure, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt the crushing weight of responsibility. That night, long after James's body was carried away, Daniel sat by the fire, staring at the sky. The stars stretched endlessly above, cold and indifferent. His brothers in the club had taught him loyalty, but this was sacred. He whispered into the flames, voice trembling. "I'll keep my word, brother. I swear it." And though the war raged on, a different kind of battle had just begun inside him. The town was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where the church bells still rang on Sundays and kids rode their bikes down cracked sidewalks without fear. It was also the kind of place where a roaring Harley-Davidson was as out of place as thunder in the middle of a wedding. Daniel, Reaper, Hayes coasted down Main Street, the low growl of his bike echoing between quiet storefronts. People turned to stare, mothers tugging their children close, shopkeepers frowning from behind glass, and old men shaking their heads as if the devil himself had rolled through town. Daniel ignored the looks. He was used to it. The leather vest, the road-worn boots, the tattoos, they told a story no one here wanted to read. But this wasn't about them. He had a promise to keep. At the end of the street stood a weathered little house. The white paint had faded into gray, the porch sagged, and the swing hung by one chain, broken and still. Daniel killed the engine, the sudden silence making the world feel heavier. He pulled off his helmet, wiped his brow, and for a long moment just sat there, staring at the place James once called home. His chest felt tight, his palms sweaty inside his gloves. Finally, he swung his leg over the bike and walked toward the porch. Before he could knock, the screen door creaked open. A young girl peered out, thin, freckled, with James's same steel gray eyes. She couldn't have been more than 10. Daniel's throat tightened. He had seen those eyes before, in a man dying on foreign soil. "Lily," a woman's voice called from inside. A figure appeared behind the girl, Emily Miller. She looked older than the photos James used to show him, grief carved into the lines of her face. She froze when she saw him standing there, a shadow of leather and scars on her porch. Her hand tightened on the doorframe. "Can I help you?" Her voice was cautious, edged with fear. Daniel cleared his throat. "Name's Daniel Hayes. I served with James. Overseas." Emily's eyes narrowed, suspicious. "James never spoke much about the war. Why are you here now?" Daniel removed his gloves, stuffing them into his back pocket. He hated how his hands shook. "Because I made him a promise. On his last day, he asked me to look after you and Lily. I should have come sooner, I know that. But I'm here now." The silence stretched. Emily studied him like a hawk, torn between slamming the door or letting him speak. "You're a biker, aren't you?" she finally asked, her gaze flicking to the patches on his vest. Daniel didn't flinch. "Yeah, but before that, I was his brother in arms. And I don't break a dying man's wish." Lily's small voice cut through the tension. "Did you know my dad?" Daniel crouched, lowering himself to her level. His rough voice softened. "He was the bravest man I ever met. Strong, kind, and the last thing he thought of was you." Lily blinked, tears threatening her eyes. Emily swallowed hard, torn between caution and compassion. Against her instincts, she opened the door wider. "Come inside," she said quietly. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. On the mantel sat a folded flag, polished metals, and a framed photo of James, smiling, alive, unaware of the fate that awaited him. Daniel stared at it, his chest tightening like of ice. He wasn't sure if Emily saw him as a guardian or an intruder, but one thing was certain. For the first time since that day on the battlefield, Daniel felt the weight of his promise shifting from memory into reality. And there was no turning back. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope. Emily kept her distance at first, polite but guarded, while Daniel tried to find small ways to keep his word without stepping too far into their lives. He fixed the sagging porch swing, replaced a few shingles on the leaky roof, and stacked firewood neatly by the shed. At night, he left bags of groceries on the porch, slipping away before they noticed. He wasn't looking for gratitude. He was just trying to honor a promise. But Lily noticed. She'd press her face to the window whenever she heard the thunder of his Harley. Within a week, she was waiting on the porch for him, her little hands waving frantically as if he were some kind of superhero. Daniel couldn't help but smile. He taught her how to patch the chain on her bike, showed her how to balance without training wheels, and even polished James's old medals with her, telling stories about the man she barely remembered. Emily watched all of this with a conflicted heart. The sight of her daughter laughing again, smiling again, was something she hadn't seen in years. But part of her feared what this man represented: the leather, the scars, the dangerous life on two wheels. Still, it was hard to deny that Lily's eyes lit up whenever Daniel was near. One evening, after dinner, Emily found Daniel sitting on the repaired porch swing, the setting sun painting his face in golden shadow. She brought him a cup of coffee and sat across from him. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Emily asked softly, "Why are you really doing all this?" Daniel stared into the mug, the steam curling up like smoke on the battlefield. His voice came low, steady, and honest. "Because I've failed a lot of people in my life. Too many. James wasn't just another soldier. He was a brother. He trusted me with the thing he loved most, you and Lily. If I can give you even a little of the peace he wanted, then maybe I can live with myself." Emily's throat tightened. She blinked against tears, her voice breaking. "You've already given us more than you know." Months slipped by, and Daniel became a fixture in their lives. He was there when Lily had nightmares, when Emily's car broke down, when bills piled high. He never asked for thanks, never expected anything in return. For him, it wasn't about redemption or recognition. It was about keeping his word. The turning point came one chilly autumn evening at Lily's school recital. She stood on stage, clutching her violin, scanning the crowd nervously. Her face lit up when she spotted Daniel in the audience, his leather vest traded for a clean shirt, his rough hands folded neatly in his lap beside Emily. He gave her a small nod, the kind of steady encouragement only a father could give. Lily played beautifully, her bow trembling but her heart steady. When the final note rang out, she ran into her mother's arms. "Dad would have loved this," she whispered against Emily's shoulder. Emily kissed her daughter's hair, then looked at Daniel. Their eyes met, and unspoken words passed between them, gratitude, trust, and something deeper. Daniel wasn't replacing James, he never could, but he had become part of their story, a guardian carved out of loyalty and loss. Later that night, Daniel rode home under a sky full of stars. The wind whipped past him, carrying memories of war, of brotherhood, of promises made in blood. He lifted his face to the night, voice breaking as he whispered, "I kept my word, brother." And for the first time in a long, restless life, Daniel felt peace.